signing up. Here we go. Woohoo! Ready to roll.
Ball rolling. Get everybody jumping in here. Look at there. Love it. Love it. I love to see everybody. And I just know, and I say this every week, I know, but I love our Tuesdays, right? This opportunity to share. And so, and I noticed that Carolyn's here. She said that she might not be making it. So it's good to see you one more time here, Carolyn. That's good. So got the doorbell going on in the background. We want to make sure that everybody gets in there. So as we get opened, anybody have any phenomenal stories to share about getting out to fly this week, right? I love that everybody's here at the Coffee Connection and I see a bunch of coffee cups. I'm liking that. That's good, right?
I'm flying as soon as this is done today. It's gorgeous out here.
Yay. Yes. Sunny Southern California. We finally have sun again. We had some weird weather there for a while. It held up a lot of flights, right? So awesome. Does anybody have
today?
What?
I get to fly the desk today.
Oh yeah. But at least you get to fly, right?
A lot of hours on the desk.
It's one way to look at it. I'm flying the desk. That's how mine is. I fly my laptop. And I enjoy it. So, all right, we're letting in a few more people in here. It is good to get out and fly. So I have my own story. I was out in Arizona flying quite a bit this last week. And, you know, out in Arizona, you think of the cactus, right? Well, you always can stay honed in on your skills. And that was one of the things that I wanted to share with everybody. I found a cactus and I made sure all my point of interest, I made sure that I had that thing locked in and just worked on those stick skills because you got to do that, right?
Right. All the time.
So Bounce, I see you changed the background there. You got anything to share with us?
Well, yeah, matter of fact, shortly here, hope probably everybody here will get an email. I'm starting a community based around technology. USOG is not going away. It's doing its thing. A lot of DoD stuff that can't be public, so it's going to do its thing. But because of CES this year, and one of the interviews that went on, the one right before mine, there's a woman by the name of Kim. She came from oil and gas and was inspired by drones, and she didn't realize what drones could do. And she was like, hey, we're all siloed and we kind of not tend to understand each other. What happens in the drone community, we use components from everybody else, but nobody understands us. So I'm building a platform that all technology can come together, all of us confer, all of us talk. There's a newsletter that's going to be out, it'll be a community. And I'm going to have featured speakers where they'll do like a 15-minute air quote tech flow / TED talk. And then we'll follow up with them with a full podcast, because a lot of the short form talks that I see, I want to know more about the people and they never follow up. So we're going to start with that, follow up. There'll be a newsletter and I'm going to have everybody in the community contribute. And it's all about thought leadership. It's all about inspiration, you know, and getting together, all of us, all of technology. We're talking technology for dummies to the CEOs, makers, builders. That's what we want to feature. So that's what we're doing.
Awesome.
So people like Vic Moss in his photography who might want to say something, Carolyn with her expertise, Desi, your expertise, and anybody else here who wants to contribute. People like Dawn Zolden, who's amazing what she does, you know. So I'm looking for everybody to contribute and just build this beautiful community.
Love
So
it.
that's the latest venture.
Count me in.
So yeah,
and you
to
heard
get
it
started,
here.
I haven't officially released it, but I do have the website up to sign up for the newsletter. Let's see, I'll put the link up in the techflowbeyond.com. There we go. That's the website. That's where it's getting started. Just getting everybody signed up, and then the first newsletter will come out in April. And looking to do, God willing, an event where we can get together, hopefully with women in drones, in when they do their event. So hopefully, but it's just a community that I'm building for everybody to, about based on thought leadership, inspiration, mentorship, all that. And that's what it's gonna be about for
I
across
love it.
all technology, not just drones, all technology. So we can collaborate and create some great stuff.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we can't wait to see more. Awesome. So, and you heard right here that people are ready and willing to participate in that.
Oh yeah.
Before we segue over to our spotlight speaker, I do want to make one really quick announcement. I'm sure everybody knows tomorrow is International Women's Day, right? Highlighting the women in the industry is a great way to go about this. So I just posted into our link the 2022 top companies for women in emerging aviation technologies. How awesome is that, right? I want to thank Sabre Wing for sponsoring it. I put the link in there so you can go check them out, because amazing companies that are doing wonderful things in the community. And quite often, I don't even know if she's here today, but quite often we have several of the people on the Coffee Connection sharing as well. With that, it's a perfect segue over to our spotlight speaker, because I know the amazing things that he has done in the industry. I've had a pleasure of actually talking with him, and I love the support that he gives for women in drones and women as entrepreneurs. And so it was like the perfect segue over to Aaron. So Aaron, I'm going to have you on mic, and I will make you spotlight speaker. And let's get this going here. Hold on one second so I can make you spotlight speaker. And can you start by just sharing a little bit about who you are and how you got into this industry?
Got it. Thank you, Desi, and thank you for everyone taking the time to come today. And I'm honored that you all think that I've got something to say. So appreciate it. Yeah, so I got into drones when I was in grad school. I went to undergrad, did creative writing, went into grad school doing GIS and remote sensing. And as was in vogue at the time, every university was getting a drone program going around the 2014-15 timeframe. And I previously volunteered as an EMT and aircrew member with the Indiana Air Search and Rescue, and had aircrew experience on UH-1H Huey helicopters. And I had brought that background into the university to, help them think about ops and policy manuals and then draft those, and was lucky enough to, go aircrew, love it. But I was able to go and really get a lot of good input from folks in industry, folks in government, folks at other universities, to bring back and help to draft that, initial manual that the university then started to use. So, at that same time, I was seeing all the wonderful things that were happening in the industry, and I got a wild hair and decided to go start a company. So. Just dove right into it, not ever had any entrepreneurial background before, but definitely dove in, learned along the way, and had the good fortune to have an enormous amount of people be supportive of what we were doing and really help educate me as we built along the way.
Oh, I'm muted. Awesome. Well, I would like to just kind of dive into the diversity aspect of it, because I know, and I know a lot of people want to hear more about remote ID, and it's such a hot topic right now, but I love the diversity that you have brought to the table. And so just right back from the very beginning of when you and I started communicating, we had that discussion of an intern that you had on board. So what are some of the things that you are doing, and how are you feeling that diversity can be promoted in our industry?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I had an enormous amount of people that really helped to educate me and help me skill up on some of those entrepreneurial things that, you know, somebody needs to do to build and, you know, grow a team and grow a business. And you know, the entrepreneurial community is really great in that other entrepreneurs are almost always open and willing to, you know, take, you know, 15, 30 minutes, go grab coffee with another entrepreneur and give them some input and advice. And there was the group that, so we work out of the Indiana IoT Lab, which is really a group of two entities, the Indiana IoT Lab and Launch Fishers, located in Fishers, Indiana. And they, sorry for the dog, of course, start talking and she gets riled up. But this group has a entrepreneurial internship program that they do in the summers where they work to pair interns with companies. And it had not been going on for a little while because of COVID, but it got started again last year. And we, you know, it's a matchmaking type of thing. You go up, you pitch to the, you know, classroom of 40 of the top picked students for this program from the local school district, which I tell you is more nerve-wracking than briefing a general sometimes. So knowing that it's really entrepreneurial focused, I tried to give the best impression of what entrepreneurship was to those students. You know, there's other bigger companies that are in there too, more traditional corporate companies that are looking to capture students, but I really wanted to capture those folks who weren't afraid to dive into the real, you know, meat and potatoes of entrepreneurship. So I'm pretty sure that I, you know, represented myself as a crazy man on stage, and I gave a snapshot of what my day had looked like up until that point in time, where it's like, yep, I was up at 5, you know, talked to 2 big defense firms, talked to, you know, a whole bunch of other folks, you know, had 7 meetings, drafted, you know, a quarter of a proposal, and now I'm here, it's noon, I haven't eaten breakfast, and I'm running on pure caffeine and adrenaline. And my intent for you all is that I'm going to, you know, take whoever works with us and put you in my sidecar as we do a $155 down the highway and teach you through doing. And one of the interns came up and approached me as soon as I was walking off stage, and she's a high school intern, she was a freshman, and like all of 80 pounds, and gave me like a hand-crushing handshake and said, I absolutely want to do that. And, you know, went through the interviews, got an interview with her, some others, and we, you know, went through the whole matchmaking thing, and we got the top 3 that we wanted. And turns out that all 3 of them actually grew up together, and that we had stumbled into this little entrepreneurial, like natural occurring entrepreneurial spring of students. And the 3 of them have just been absolutely fantastic in having kind of those natural things that you look at that would really stick out as the potential for an entrepreneur. And so, you know, they're smarter than I am. So I look at this as going, it's my duty now to work with them to try and hone those skills and give them the experiences through doing, so that, you know, if they choose, they can all go out and start a company by the time they're in their earlier mid-20s. So been fantastic to work with, and really brought additional insights and thoughts to the rest of the team as well, from a totally different perspective.
Awesome. So have you seen some of the young ladies that you started with? Have you seen them progress, and have you been able to see some of the progress that they've made?
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry for the dog again.
No, that's what we're all about, right? We're all just having fun, networking.
Yeah. Yeah, so they've all gone from, you know, a little shy to not afraid to, you know, blast out an email. And, you know, one of them, Sandri, she was over with us at AUVSI, the Indiana AUVSI chapter. And then I hired her and brought her into Pierce Aerospace right after the summer. But, you know, got, just as one example out of the 3, she we got her going with engaging outside to others, and actually doing interviews to learn about how we as the Indiana AUVSI chapter, which my other hat is I'm the fools in the state elected me as their president for the Indiana chapter. So, worked with her through there to really get her exposed to working with other business leaders. And at the end of the summer, she was going out on her own, making some of those phone calls, doing some of those organizational pieces to help run chapter events on her own.
Oh, it's so inspiring when you see the progress that is made and the doors that are opened, and what a blessing that you've opened so many doors for people. Yeah, so that's just amazing. If you were to give a tip, there's a lot of people here that do a lot of STEM activities and obviously support diversity in the industry. If you were to give any tip or suggestion, what would that be?
So if you're working with students, they're much further along and ready for those next steps than what you would think they are. So I don't want to say throwing them in the deep end, but I'm always willing to push to give that student an additional set of responsibility, and knowing that they're still a student and that there's going to be a mistake, and that's an opportunity to learn. And so I'll work with them to purposely help them have constructive challenges. And, one of the things that I told them early on in the summer is we're going to keep ramping up on some of the things that we're pushing you all towards. And frankly, my goal is to hit a spot where you get overwhelmed. And that's good. And we're going to talk about that then, because what that means is that you've not made a mistake or anything. We've gotten to a learning point or some place where we can talk about how we're getting to that piece of inoculating you to stress, inoculating you to growth, to that next piece, so that you can take that next step and kind of get into a position where you're comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's at a spot then where we know that you're in a period of growth. And really, when I think about other STEM programs and other educational programs or intern positions with entrepreneurship, is let's make sure we're always constructively challenging those students to get to that next period of growth.
Wow, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. Awesome. So let's segue over to remote ID. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, your perspective, and such like that.
Yeah, so we are a focused, remote ID provider. We build beacons. We can do some integration with OEMs if there's interest there. And we also make receivers that passively monitor the airspace for those remote ID messages, so that we can then turn that into a remote ID data stream to push out to an unmanned traffic management system, or if it's a security and defense customer, a counter UAS system, or equivalent and relevant third-party type of system that would be looking to ingest that data. We've been working on remote ID for years. We've been developing it over on the DoD and security side since 2018, with contracting with US Air Force. And then, of course, those different segments of our internal testing and development, and working with our government customers to continue to develop some of the technologies around remote ID to make sure that we're ready to roll this thing out.
Awesome. So you in the past have been working with the DoD. How, as far as consumers and as far as our operations and such like that, how do you see a fit there?
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of folks that are out there that have, a lot invested to a fleet. Some of that fleet may not have an over-the-air update or something that can work with a OEM fix to that. So the thing that I think about from the consumer side is trying to make life as easy as possible and getting a remote ID beacon product that is going to be as applicable to the types of, flight missions that you all do, whether that be a photography mission, whether that be some sort of survey mission. We really think about how we can make something that's not going to impact the flight profile of the aircraft, but also make sure that we've got something that's going to have enough battery life to actually accomplish a day of flying. So that's where we've kind of focused on developing product for a beacon that can be a relatively easy, aftermarket fix so that the consumer pilot can be in compliance with the remote ID regulation then.
Awesome. And Vic, you put a question into there. Would you like to unmic and ask your question?
Yeah, there we go. Hit the right buttons here. Yeah, one of the major issues with remote ID that we all know about is pilot location, and I know that you're able to separate pilot location, takeoff location, depending on which version you're using, separate from the packet and kind of shield that. Is that something you are looking at doing for pilot safety?
Yeah. So one of the things that it's in the remote ID rule in the comment section, we advocated for session ID pretty heavily, where we can, make that so only, say, a law enforcement officer could run the plate information on your car. But general public could get an ID number, not an ID number, but a number that could be associated back if it was run through the right system. That didn't happen, as we all know. We still, bring that up in conversation as appropriate whenever we're in places where we can advocate for that. We're looking at in compliance with the remote ID standard as is, which for the beacon needs the takeoff location of where that aircraft was at. So for us to have something that meets those means of compliance, we need to make sure the product that can, so.
Well, and I get that it's required to be broadcast, but it's not required in the receivers to be received. So is there a possibility to have in your receiver systems to go, and actually in your broadcast system as well, to separate that out and kind of have its own little key for those who need it, like the police, responding police officers, things like that? Or is that just too complicated for what you're trying to do?
So it's going to get into some things where the FAA may then come back and the product is doing, which would prevent it. From a receiver side, receivers going to be listening for those messages as they come across, whether they're from our beacons or anyone else's beacons. We've already demonstrated to some of the government folks that, hey, these things can pick up any of those ASTM F3411-22 compliant broadcasts. So it's one of those things where it'll introduce complex product piece. And, in reality, as of today, we're not broadcasting what those receivers pick up out to the wide world. We're directing the information that those receivers pick up in customer orientated today government end users. So that'll have to grow for the commercial rollout of this, but at a certain point, we're a little bit restricted on what we can do with it from FAA regulations as we develop the product. But those are things that, we all have in the back of our mind, because I definitely understand we don't want to necessarily show where the pilot is and broadcasting that information out to the wide world. There's a segment of audience that is an applicable piece of information for them. But those are things where, we as a company that's developing these technologies, we can show to a government customer, hey, here's a, segment of where we can go with our roadmap that still accomplishes the mission that you need to have accomplished, while also providing some additional privacy to the pilots that are out there. And it doesn't compromise your mission, and it does enhance the, privacy and potential safety of that pilot.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. And Sheila, She had a question about the price point, just even a guesstimate on that. If you,
Yeah, no, it's always a good question. The last couple of years of supply chain are make me look at, there is no such thing as a crystal ball anymore. But let me put it this way. We've got pre-production units. We've done extensive testing on those. Weight's a little bit more. I can get to that in a second, Vic. We've done pre-production testing of those. We're going through some of the other certifications and some other extensive testing on these right now. My intent is that, a beacon is not something that is going to be a major revenue driver for a company. The goal with the beacon is to work with the pilots out there to make sure that we've got the compliance piece going, because ultimately what's going to be in the best interest is having a compliant airspace, because we're then going to be able to do more advanced operations. And from that piece, I look at some of the more advanced batteries out there, and my intent is to make sure that we can get the price at a reasonable cost that is comparable to those batteries, if not lower, if we can possibly do that. And then weight. So Vic, our current weight is around 30 grams. Once we get to, once we get out of the pre-production prototype into the final version, we may be able to do a little bit there. There may, if a supplier needs to be changed and a internal capacitor weighs 1 gram more or something, you'll see a little plus minus, but that's about where we're at right now.
Is that modular or is that for internal?
That is modular, so
Awesome.
That's everything contained.
Nice weight.
Yeah, we've seen where that's, we've not seen any observational type of performance in inhibitors to what we've done in our testing that would give us any major concern. And at this point in time, I think we're north of 30 different types of aircraft that we've flown on. So we've tested pretty extensively with it in a few different environments. So Don, great question. It's a heavy "it depends" question, because we've designed the receivers to be agnostic to antennas. So depending upon a customer, and in this case, right now, the customer focus for receivers is more on government or commercial side of uses. But let me put it this way, they won't be the same cost as some of the counter UAS systems that are out there. Lower than that. But those do have a significantly higher amount of engineering that's gone into them in terms of how they perform from how we think about deploying the hardware, as well as how the software on the back end works to make the systems work efficiently.
Looks like she had a follow-up question. Go ahead, Dawn, if you want to ask your follow-up question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, because the TTPs, tactics, techniques, procedures have not really been written for this, and public safety agencies are already struggling, trying to even launch their own drone programs and get the funding for those. And so, now and ultimately they're going to have the responsibility, even though they don't have the authority to do anything about errant drones, right? People call them first. And so if the idea is, and that was a big idea, I think, behind the remote ID rule, was let's give law enforcement some tools to be able to know who are the bad guys out there. How much, kind of all in are these folks looking at to build, let's just call it a remote ID program, because I don't even think you can call it a counter UAS program, because they don't even have the ability it's so odd. Under the counter UAS authorities, they don't have the ability to even, at least according to the DOJ, passively monitor or, to detect and identify. But yet remote ID is saying, here's this technology that everybody should be able to tap into that essentially does that. And law enforcement should be doing that. So I think there's a big disconnect in the law there. But that aside, the idea is law enforcement should be doing it. So how much is it going to cost them to do it?
So it shouldn't cost them the same that, say, a more advanced counter UAS system would need. You know, our whole thesis on this is that we do focus on the remote ID so that you can layer that capability into, you know, whether you're looking at a commercial or, you know, security environment, you can layer remote ID into the UTM environment for the airspace management, or you can layer remote ID into the security side of the house as well for counter UAS. We have worked with law enforcement on it in the past. We've been extensively developing how that works in the defense side of the house since 2018. So I won't get into it on a call, but there are some TTPs on how to layer it and how to work with those different systems when they're put together. Depending upon the scope and the mission set of what a law enforcement agency needs, that could look as diverse as all your different law enforcement agencies across the country in terms of what they need, how they deploy it, and how they utilize it. You know, a medium-sized town in the Midwest on a 4th of July parade is going to look a little bit different than Manhattan on New Year's Eve. So there's going to be a pretty distinct difference in how they deploy that technology. But let me put it this way: I grew up with law enforcement and worked as security in conjunction with law enforcement pretty heavily. I actually worked for a police department as an unsworn security officer, and I understand the budgets that they have and the objectives that they have to try and accomplish within the allocated resources that they have, which are often constrained. So we've had that entire philosophy in the back of our mind on how we've been developing the receivers. You know, these aren't going to be the ones that we develop for law enforcement and for security purposes aren't going to be, you know, something that you go pick up off the shelf from Walmart, you know, type of cost, but it's not going to be out of the realm of possibility for a law enforcement budget to be able to incorporate them, to bring those out to the different security missions that they need to accomplish.
Are you looking at just a pure purchase model? Is there like essentially security as a service where, you know, you'll have people working for you that can deploy to, you know, maybe the local law enforcement, you know, in Podunk County doesn't need to buy this thing, but they could contract with you guys. You come out, set it up, and make it happen.
Yeah, so it really depends. That's one thing that we're going to see how the market evolves with interest and the, you know, what's the willingness to buy? Do we need this thing, you know, for 2 events out of the year, or do we need to have this thing because we've got a part of, you know, our community that needs to have persistent monitoring for it? So those are conversations that we're having with law enforcement departments right now, actually, to further, you know, evolve. Okay, now that this regulation's in place, we know that aircraft are already starting to incorporate remote ID into their, you know, broadcasts. The products are coming out. What's going to work best for how we service that law enforcement customer then and help them to accomplish that mission? So you may see both. So it'll be one of those things that will evolve, and we'll learn with the customers on how we can best serve them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Good to see you too.
Awesome. Carolyn asked about, are you taking new orders for government customers?
Yeah, so if any government customers want to get in touch with us on it, I can.
I just put your webpage in there. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. We've got a contact form on the webpage. I was going to do the same thing. We can certainly have that conversation with those folks.
Awesome. Awesome. And I did see one other question that I need to scroll back up to. And does it have night flight options?
Dennis, could you elaborate?
Yes. So just as a
My power just went out. Am I there? Oh no. Hold on. Power just went out.
certification process right now on it. So moving as quickly as we possibly can with actually making sure we can get some of those certifications done and in place so that we can get that product out into the market. The means of the compliance piece we're familiar with, but making sure that we've got some of those other stamps when you look on the back of an electronics product that are all there. Those are things that we really want to make sure that we can incorporate into what we're doing and how we get that product to market.
Great, thank you.
Have
Desiree,
you-
you
Have you started the
Yes.
DOC process yet?
So sorry. My internet went out. All my power went off.
Oh,
So, good thing I got a mobile phone, right?
okay, Vicky's gonna ask the question. Go ahead.
Yeah. What have you started the DOC process yet?
we're doing the other pieces before
Ah.
we do DOC. We're not, so we're familiar with the DOC. We were part of the ASTM group that,
Okay.
worked with FAA on doing the DOC piece. We have had pre-production units already operational. We're not too concerned about being able to meet DOC compliance. We could probably do that next week because it's self-compliant, declaration. So
Great.
So, go ahead, Sharon.
No, I was just gonna check and see if there were any questions pending. Go ahead.
Yes. So I lost my chat. So if anybody had any chat questions into the chat, please feel free to ask. Open up the mic, ask your questions, because this is a great time to dive deep into remote ID. If you have those deep questions about it and you're not familiar with it, this is a great time to ask. While we're looking for some of those questions to pop up into our chat, I know you've discussed some of the things that are on the horizon and things that you're kind of working through, but what do you foresee as the biggest hurdle as you're moving forward?
biggest hurdle, probably adoption. When I say adoption, I don't think anyone who's on this call is going to be, an adoption hurdle, but rather the folks who've got drones that are sitting in a closet or that just go and buy for the first time, and really kind of that piece of the segment of the drone community that still hasn't had a lot of educational exposure, which it's not just remote ID that has, challenges or hurdles there. I think that's a universal challenge. We've been in the, unmanned aircraft safety team, now drone safety team, since its inception, and really addressing that segment of the market has always been our biggest risk factor. Is I just got a drone and I don't know what to do with it other than I'm going to go have fun and fly right now, but not checking the airspace, not having a basic, safety procedure in place. I think that group and the challenges that are associated with working to get that group educated are going to remain the biggest challenge to the industry, and remote ID is not unique in that, but the challenge that we'll have with adoption with them is them getting to a point of actually understanding that they need to have this thing on there, which a lot of pilots that I'll go talk to that are in that segment still don't know that there's this remote ID thing. They also don't necessarily know that there's this FAA thing, but that's a whole separate issue that I think requires, we could talk about that all afternoon.
Awesome. Michelle asked a question about interested in learning more about the security back end of the user repository. Awesome.
Michelle, could you unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, Michelle, would you like that in mic?
Yeah. So really quick, I was just interested in learning a little bit more, as we look towards more, cloud bases for user information, just how are you making sure you're safeguarding that information from anyone that may be able then to, funnel into the network of users, so to speak, or have, information that then would be getting into other folks' hands. I mean, I understand the whole point is the purpose of having more visibility into this, but making sure that, this isn't being infiltrated by nefarious folks.
Yep. See you, Vic. So from our perspective, we can't necessarily speak to anything that FAA would be doing on FAA registration databases or anything like that. But from when it comes to our perspective, a lot of our team comes from the DoD and the security and space. And those are things that we are regularly looking at and things that we take into consideration as we go through development of product and development of the different systems and attributes that we have that contribute to our remote ID mission. We won't necessarily get into how we go about doing those things, but
For sure.
those are things that we always think about and are at the forefront of some of the conversations when we get the engineering team together.
Yeah, no, we've been learning more about the FedRAMP piece. That's kind of more of what I was like. Are you familiar at all? Do you think you'll have to go through that process? Okay.
We're familiar with it. It depends on what FAA or any of those other government users that we work with, how they want to work with any of those collected ID messages. So.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Be sure I know we're getting up to the kind of the cutoff time. So if you have any last questions, be sure you throw those into the chat. So I would like to ask my one last question here, as far as what can we do? How can we go about learning more about it, or being involved, or just learning about the processes involved in it? Or how can we help in any way?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, and again, this isn't the unique to remote ID challenge, but is helping to get any of those other first-time pilots, that early, I don't want to say at risk, but the segment of the drone population that has some of those educational pieces that they still need to incorporate into their, flight profiles, into their systems. They may not have systems yet, but incorporating that into what they do is really the biggest thing. And now another piece of that education is the remote ID adoption. I do think that while imperfect in how it rolled out, I think there'll be opportunity for evolution with it. And, us being able to advocate to the FAA with any data that we have, because again, they're a safety regulator and they make data-driven decisions. And if we're able to show how we can, evolve to a better remote ID environment through adoption and through use of it, then I think that gets to a better position for everyone. It's really a collaborative approach to how we think about moving forward, and with everyone being a part of how we evolve those next, what those next steps look like in the further development of the National Airspace System.
I love it. So I like that bigger picture, where we're talking about evolving and what we can do, these baby steps, and it becomes a much grander picture as we move forward. So we are about out of our time where we normally would wrap it up. And so I just want to see if there was any last minute questions. Anybody want to go ahead and jump in, take advantage of all the knowledge that Aaron offers. And so otherwise we are about up at the well, this is where I usually would cut things off. And so that way, if people had to go to their next meeting, they're all set. So looks like we are pretty much wrapping it up. Is there any last comments or thoughts that you have, Aaron, that you would like to share with us?
Oh, goodness. I didn't think of any. What, just as a real quick, maybe raise a hands or in the chat, what's your favorite type of flying that you do? Is it, survey, piloting? I have no idea what types of flying everyone does. Would be interested to hear that.
Oh, I like that one too. Put that into the chat. Do a shout out. I love it. Yes.
FPV racing.
I'm pretty excited. I just got my FPV dialed in and I got to do my first flip. We got some mapping. We got ag. Photography. I love it. Oh, great question to everyone. Tourism. Just
Flying, love
flying.
it.
Don't you love that for a comment? Cinematography. Love it. I love doing 3D models. Ag and education. There you go. I like it. Yes.
Yeah, I
Oh,
love
good question.
flying with new pilots. We did so last summer we took a pilot who had very little experience yet, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to fly formations?" And he was like, "What?" It was like, "Stick this altitude, go in a circle, do not change your altitude. I'll hook up right with you, and we'll do a little thing." And we absolutely loved it. So it was great to get a kid that type of hey, we can do this stuff together and have a little fun. And we took one of our other engineers and stacked a third one right there. And so we had 3 of them kind of zooming around out by our lab. So it's good fun.
Oh.
Doing the education stuff. I'm a photographer too, so love it, but I don't get to go fly as much or do as much photo as I used to.
Yeah, because you're flying the desk.
Somebody's got to
That's
do
how
it.
works.
So
That's how it
got to
works.
keep this thing in compliance here.
Yeah, Bounce and I have had many conversations about that. Suddenly you don't get to fly so much because you're at that desk.
Yep, yep.
So,
I got lucky. I got to fly my old desk this weekend.
oh, that's always fun.
Yeah,
Actually, it's a little bit of a
yeah.
challenge when you go back.
Well, yeah. I went to fly a mixing board. It was really cool.
Oh,
Nice.
well, that sounds like a fun one. Yeah. So just out of curiosity, Aaron, what drones did you fly when you did your formation?
2 of the smaller Mavics. I don't remember which version. And then I had a Inspire. So
Yeah. Oh, that's a fun activity to do. So
yep.
awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, we thank you so much for joining us today. We thank you for sharing all the knowledge. We thank you for everything that you're actually doing in the industry. And we can't wait to see how things move forward. Hope to see you at AUVSI. Yes.
Always.
Yeah. All right. Because that's one of the many hats you wear,
Yep. Yeah, I need to book that now, actually. Good. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I'll be given so if any of you are interested in dual use business and how to work with government as a customer, I will be giving a presentation at a workshop at AUVSI on that. So happy to have anyone come along, and we'll teach you how to spell SBIR. So
Okay, Carolyn, I think, had to jump off, but I will pass that along to her because I believe she would be interested in something like that. So awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much. Have a wonderful Tuesday. All right. And we'll see
thank you all.
everybody. And I'll just hang on here a little bit if anybody had some questions or chat or anything. But Aaron, I know you're a very busy person. We thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
All right. See you in May.
See you in May.
That kind of wraps it up.